Hello everyone, welcome back. The PvP meta has been rapidly shifting as of late, which has led to many players complaining about certain playstyles. The Crucible is undoubtedly becoming more passive, non-confrontational and positional every day, especially with the introduction of easy damage resistance and overshields. In my last video, which was a collaboration with my great friend and fellow YouTuber Gjörda, I have demonstrated one of the strongest such options with the Sentinel 3.0. So the natural question now becomes, how do we beat that build or any similar ideas? You heard me right, you're not only getting the overpowered build from my channel, you're also getting the counter option. And actually, let me go on a side tangent here. I have yet to find a single build in today's meta which is so good that it admits no counterplay, besides using the same build yourself. If you have a build or setup you struggle against, let me know in the comments and I'm happy to share the counter options with you. Or it might happen that together we can find a truly busted build. But the topic of today's video are counter options to passive playstyles, and predominantly those centered around abusing health regeneration, overshields, and damage resistance. I'll also rank the options from worst to best, so you know what you're getting out of each and every one of them. Of course, the list might not be in any particular order, but hopefully the ratings should reflect how effective the individual setups are as counter-passive playstyles. Let's get started with some of the things you might think are good ideas, but really don't work. You might be thinking that an effective way to end a camper's career would be to just shotgun them point blank with your Fellwinter's Lie. Okay, but maybe a headshot with a chaperone or any other slug. That just has to work. Nope, this is a very bad idea. Forget shotguns entirely. In a similar line of thought, almost all fusions are legitimately bad choices against damage resistance. And this one might hurt, but yet another awful choice are traditional scout rifles and, most notably, 180 and, listen closely, 140 RPM hand cannons. You heard me right. Your beloved palindrome you grinded for is a bad choice against one of the most prevalent playstyles in modern-day Crucible. Just as shocking as its placement on the list is the palindrome's reason for such a bad performance. It does not do enough DPS. Yeah, DPS. Welcome to PvE inside of PvP. If you're playing against a damage resist setup or you need to melt multiple players quickly, high damage output very quickly is a really valuable metric. Sure, you could argue that it's over an incredibly small time span of usually less than 1 second, yet when damage resistance, healing, or overshields are in play, the kill times and engagement durations are much longer. That's dangerous. Here's a list of the DPS numbers of all the primary weapon archetypes in the game, sorted in increasing order. Can you guess where the 140 RPM hand cannon lives? Here, I'll give you a hint. Those are the 900 RPM lightweight submachine gun. Put your bets in the comment section. I'll reveal it in 3, 2, 1, here. On the far left, just next to the 120 RPM hand cannons. Ladies and gentlemen, this is why you do not use a 140 RPM hand cannon against a tanky playstyle. It is like trying to DPS a raid boss using this thing. Do not do it! It's shocking. At almost all times in the history of Destiny 2's meta, basic hand cannons built for range and consistency were the absolute kings of the Crucible. Almost every alternate playstyle found its demise at the hands of a good player using a well-rolled 140 or back in the day 150 RPM hand cannon. After all, with everyone having around 200-ish health, the peak shotting potential of hand cannons was far superior to any other option, killing in 3 short and swift peaks. Pulses required too many headshots, auto rifles killed too slow, and they also needed a continuous stream of bullets. SMGs and sidearms had way too little range, and scout rifles didn't include the dead man's tail. But now, today, I want you to delete the idea of hand cannons always being the best choice out of your mind, as those times are long forgone. This guy is not the answer to all questions, and specifically most of these are not the answer to passive playstyles. Destiny 2 is played like rock, paper, scissors. There are options and counter options. So if you find yourself struggling with a hand cannon, don't get frustrated at yourself, at your potentially suboptimal role, or at your opponent. Just try some other options, and who knows, maybe you will find success. Though fair warning, don't expect any of the counter options on this list to be quote-unquote free wins. You will need to get decently skilled with any of these to reliably defeat a strong passive player. Remember, in the end, it is always a battle of two players, and usually the better one wins. Sure, a part of that skill difference is having the correct build, but it's not all of it. The thing I'm going to do for you is to give you the best options. Yep, the oh so humble Control-C, Control-V keybinds for copy and paste. Oh, how they're always there for you in a moment's notice. Yet so many of us are oblivious to their supreme power whenever we find ourselves on the losing side of a match. Just like your opponent can start the game of chess with e4, you can respond with e5. Just like they can camp a stag rift, you can do the same. So if you take nothing from today's video, remember one thing. Build making is a part of this game, and if you got beaten by someone's build, don't hesitate to copy it and master it yourself. Okay, enough memeing, let's get to it. Witherhoard is an exotic grenade launcher in the kinetic slot, which spits out a pool of blight which damages any enemies on top of it. In a way, this is the ultimate you shall not pass to any rift, barricade, glacier grenade, or really anything. It will remove area from the map for your opponent, and it will force them to respect the grenade. Honestly, it's one of the strongest choices and also a very skillful one. Sure, spamming it isn't skillful, but it's also not going to get you far. Due to the shortage of special ammo in PvP, you need to be very smart about where you launch your Witherhoards. The only thing I know of that can reliably survive sitting in a blight pool is the incredibly rapid healing of the Well of Radiance. Every other super, any amount of overshield, will get straight melted if your opponent spent even a second on the blight. Though unfortunately the reason I have to rank Witherhoard as bad, even though it's really powerful, is because it requires special ammo. Passive players will be ready to reposition 2 times, and after those 2 times, you are gonna be kinda stuck with the Witherhoard because you have only 2 shots to work with off spawn. Of course, you could just start the game with the Witherhoard and then swap to some swappable primary option, ideally one from later on in this list. Following the same idea, sniper rifles are theoretically awesome at deleting anyone from the battlefield. Maybe a rapid-fire headshot can be survived by some really tanky damage resist builds, but generally speaking, you're killing everyone with a single aggressive frame headshot. And that's all there is to it. But sniper rifles don't rank higher as pretty bad because of their ammo economy. Again, what are you gonna do after the second shot? So sniper rifles, specifically adaptive and aggressive frames, are good choices if you can land the handshots and if you have enough ammo. Our final bad entry to this list is the Dead Man's Tale. This might be surprising because in general the DMT is considered to be an extremely oppressive primary weapon. Yet similar to hand cannons, it shows its weaknesses against passive playstyles. However, its problems are far less pronounced than in the case of hand cannon. It does significantly more DPS than hand cannons, it does have virtually infinite range, it allows you to be mobile and reposition rapidly, and most importantly, it ramps up its damage with every headshot. This is the key reason why it's decently good against players who keep regenerating their health. The more they wait, the more damage they have to deal with because of cranial spike. It does require a lot of skill to use against a passive player. I said it, there's also a skillful side to the Deadman's, especially now that it's gotten nerfed. You will be pressured to land quick hipfire headshots, otherwise you're performing barely better than the 120 hand cannons. With perfect accuracy and quick target selection, you can consistently get off 2 taps against players who don't want to commit to a duel. Unfortunately, due to the relatively short duration of cranial spike, I just couldn't rank the DMT any higher on this list. It shouldn't discourage you from using it. After all, it's a great primary weapon as a primary weapon. and the fact that it's an actual counter to passive players is just a cherry on the cake. With its incredible range spectrum, the Deadman's Tale will let you emphasize your playstyle however you want, though I'd still urge you to exploit its utility beyond just camping somewhere in the corner of the map. Though of course you can certainly do that too. One thing you should never forget is what abilities you have at your disposal. Lots of the grenades we can choose actually can do a great job dealing with players who won't move. Some ideas would be the Void Wall, the Storm Grenade, Pulse Grenade, Solar Grenade, and much more. Contrary to popular belief, the Vortex Grenades don't suck. Well, okay, I didn't mean it like that. All of these are decent choices and they can stop someone from sitting in some kind of rift or damage resistance in a pinch. Depending on the kinds of opponents you're facing, you might want to switch up your grenade choice if you find you need to counter more passive players. The problem of this idea are mostly the lengthy cooldowns, and the fact that some overshields or damage buffs are actually mobile. When the grenades work, they will force your enemy to reposition, but after that, you're often back at square zero without a grenade charge. Ideally, you'd preface a strong push with the grenade so you can catch your opponent off guard while they're rotating away from their rifts, barricades, or glaciers. For people abusing mobile damage buffs like Lumina or mobile overshields like the Void Titan, other grenades can prove to be useful too. Any kind of sticky or magnetic or fusion will work. Arc bolts or even cold snap grenades are decent choices too. These can invalidate your opponent's damage boost or overshield if you use them well. Just make sure to manage your cooldowns appropriately. Do you remember this gun? The exotic 180 RPM hand cannon from Gambit. I bet you forgot it because it's just that, a 180 RPM hand cannon. Since Luna's Howler Not Forgotten got dethroned, the 180 RPM meta has never resurfaced. And it's quite clear why 180s just don't work. You trade bad handling, bad reload, bad base range, a long kill time, and bad peak shotting potential just to get a predictable recoil pattern. This is not worth using in everyday Crucible, and Malfeasance definitely isn't my pick to win fair duels. However, its exotic perk can absolutely blow up many damage resistance ideas. Do you get that joke? Explosive slug and blowing up, you know? Anyways, the point is, most weapons get that kill time extended well above 1 or 1.5 seconds by healing or damage resistance options. Though Malfeasance bypasses that, as its 5th shot at the 1.3 second mark will detonate the rest of the slug, dealing a massive burst of damage. You have quite a decent amount of time before the slugs disappear from your opponents, so you can take quite a bit of time to accumulate those 5 slugs. If you and a teammate both use Malfeasance, both of you can contribute to the 5 slug total to explode your enemy. I really believe that Malfeasance is a very strong option against passive players. It might be cumbersome to incorporate a 180 RPM hand cannon in a team build due to its low damage output, but it can very well be worth it if the enemies are playing just right. Or wrong, rather. The legend Pattycakes himself popularized Frenzy as an option for PvP. It's a damage, handling, and reload perk in one. For being in combat, you get massive buffs along with the 15% buff to your outgoing damage. Here, being in combat means either dealing or receiving damage over a cumulative period of 12 seconds. If you don't do one of those two things for 5 seconds, your progress is reset. Cammy saw that many playstyles which focus on pressuring your opponents would allow Frenzy to shine. You could punish players who kept chip damaging you without committing by eventually proccing a damage perk. A very popular way to use this perk is on the Gambit submachine gun. Good luck getting that one, but also other weapon types work well too. The key to abusing Frenzy is getting some easy way to chip damage your opponent. A particularly smart choice are the Gemini Jester exotic boots for the Hunter, because the blinding effect actually deals 1 tick of damage, which will count towards Frenzy. I will be ranking Frenzy as mediocre, because it's really hard to activate. My principal complaint with Frenzy is that generally the 5-second window will run out before you can regenerate health. So it's almost always a better idea to go into cover and therefore waste Frenzy than to continue dueling your opponent. If you can get regeneration from other sources, Frenzy can be a very effective way to punish players who will only chip damage you. Of course, you should not sleep on it in PvP, give it a fair try, and you might like it. With the launch of the Witch Queen expansion, we got our hands on yet another damage perk which is very similar to Frenzy. Focus Fury will give you 10 seconds of 20% extra damage whenever you land half of your base magazine-sized headshot. This time is extended to 12 seconds with the enhanced variant. Your progress is reset if you reload or switch weapons. This might sound like a tall order to you. After all, some weapons have really large magazine sizes. For example, with the Summoner, you'd need to land over 20 headshots without missing too much. What you have to understand, though, is that Focus Fury is the only damage perk in Destiny 2 whose activation requirement both does not include a kill and is not time limited. This makes it the only damage perk you can reliably activate in a 1v1 duel. You can get a few headshots now, go pick up a drink, get some more, maybe eat something, and still you will not lose your progress unless you reload or switch weapons. And the final cherry on the cake is that you can actually get bullets back in the mag without reloading. Transversive steps, overflow, shoot to loot, slide shot, and almost all reload options except the hunter dodge will not reset your progress. People, this is crazy. Why are not more YouTubers talking about this? Anyone who gets headshotted by you has officially contributed to activating your damage perk. Something like the Cantata or Crisis Inverted only need 5 headshots to proc Focus Fury. The 20% damage buff makes them do 84 per headshot, which is more than a 120 RPM hand cannon or the Dead Man's Tale. And you don't need a kill for this! The Peace of Mind's DPS with Focus Fury is actually at SMG levels. Focus Fury is S tier and everyone is sleeping on it. Shit. Maybe I should not have told them. Too late now. Continuing the idea of bringing PvE into PvP, did you ever think of using the Bleak Watcher? Yes, that aspect for the Shadebinder which lets you convert your grenade into a sentient turret. This one's really popular for PvE because it can quickly freeze an entire room without putting you in harm's way. This works in a similar way in PvP, but it won't quite freeze your opponents as quickly. Though it will fire aggressively at them, and it is yet another thing your opponents need to deal with. It can be an effective distraction, and it can force your opponents into a situation where you have first shot. That extra bit of damage can easily be the deciding factor to melt through an overshield or any kind of damage resistance. Paired with a high DPS weapon, you can easily counter players trying to play passive. Though I will rank this option only as mediocre, as the turret can easily get killed by your opponents. Also, the projectiles have travel time, which will give your opponent a chance to run away. Still, it's a decent choice which can synergize well with a coordinated team. And now for the absolutely pro tip on how to counter players using the Bleak Watcher. Killing it will actually activate perks like Kill Clip. So for example, Multima can absolutely destroy your opponent's dreams. Let's now talk about some of the best options for dealing with passive players. One of the most hand-off and easiest ways to completely disable many passive ideas is the newly added and recently buffed ability for the Voidwalker called Child of the Old Gods. In my friends group we like to call this little guy Void Baby Jesus. Well, in contrast to its benign name, the Child of Old Gods can do really ungodly things to passive players. For you to understand why, you need to investigate exactly how the Void Soul works. You can summon this guy just by popping a rift anywhere. He'll hang out on your shoulder for 25 seconds, and if you do nothing, he'll just peace out. However, if you shoot someone in direct line of sight to you, the Void Body will take off and chase your opponents down until they move far away from their original position. If they don't, the Void Body will deploy close to your opponent, tethering them. It has a very big radius of 10 meters where it will tether other enemies too. This means they'll be weakened and slowed while also getting damaged over time too. Unfortunately, the Void Body isn't quite strong enough to kill a full health Guardian, but it will get them quite close. And still, this isn't really the selling point. All of the debuffs will stop your opponent's regeneration for a really long time, and they will deny any kind of advantage from damage resistance or an overshield. Titans behind barricades, warlocks in rifts, or hunters in dusk fields are all extremely juicy targets for the Void Body. And if you're asking yourself why is the Void Buddy better than other companions, mainly Arc and Stasis Buddies, well, there are many reasons. The Arc Soul has limited range, and its shots are easily dodged by those who've crossed that ever-elusive movement skill gap. Also, the Arc Buddy's shots have travel time, and they require you to be in direct line of sight for your opponent far longer. In contrast to that, you can technically short peek your opponent with the child, and then hide until it reaches them. And compared to the Stasis Buddy, there are three main advantages. First, because you prepare the Void Buddy and then it automatically departs, you'll never be exposed to your opponent without a weapon in your hands. Second, the Void Buddy cannot get shot in flight and it instantly deploys upon landing, meaning your opponent doesn't get the chance to shoot it before it starts damaging them, and that they don't get the chance to dodge its attack. Your opponent has to run or to accept the weakening. Both options are potentially devastating. Stopping someone's regen gives you more time to kill them, and while the weakening debuff is small, when you combine it with the actual damage over time, it will result in much more outgoing damage on your behalf, or simply put, easier duels. Should your opponent opt to run, you will be able to grab any position they leave behind. This might not sound too good to you until you realize just how big of an advantage a good position can be. And the third and final reason is just how ridiculously aggressive the Void Buddy chases. The Bleak Watcher really only goes where you throw it, and its projectiles are kinda slow. This guy lands at your opponent's doorstep and it instantly tethers them. Bonus points for entering through their backyard. There are 3 entries left. They're all primary weapons, and let's get to them. The third best option to deal with passive players, specifically in Trials of Osiris, is the Hawkmoon. It's a fantastic hand cannon, great stats, great random roll potential, a beautiful pay-to-win aesthetic. Was I supposed to say that? Though the reason a 140 RPM hand cannon with horrible DPS made it up to spot number 3 on a list which highly prefers DPS options is because, my dear viewers, Hawkmoon's DPS can be way higher. Until recently, the idea of landing 7 headshots to get that massive damage final shot was quite unrealistic against good players. However, all of that changed with the introduction of the hand cannon holster mod. For just 2 energy, it will allow you to drop bullets one by one into the magazine of Hawkmoon, potentially giving you just that extra last paracausal stack you will need. Note, this doesn't work if your magazine is down to only 1 bullet, because swapping off Hawkmoon at that point gets rid of all stacks, and it also won't work if you're only missing 1 bullet from the magazine, as again filling up the magazine will delete all of your stacks. With this in mind though, you can easily collect stacks and then get that massive damage spike to remove 1 player from any amount of damage resistance guaranteed. There's basically no other primary weapon in the game that can do this, which is why Hawkmoon is a really amazing choice for dealing with passive playstyles. The reason is not number 1 is because you only get to abuse its power against 1 player, and there are situations where even the initial pick isn't enough. For example, if you're playing 3 behemoths in trials, sniping one of them might not be enough to assure you the round 1, because it's very likely they'll get the rest with the avalanche of glaciers. Nonetheless, Hawkmoon is a great neutral game choice, and it's extremely powerful against low players. At the number 2 spot, we have the terribly deadly Tarrabah. The dad jokes. This is an exotic 750 RPM SMG with a sneakily high zoom value. Remember, 750 RPM SMGs are close to the top of the DPS ladder, meaning they are by default less affected by overshields and damage resistance. But this obviously isn't the only reason it's on this list. This SMG's exotic perk hungers for damage, be it incoming or outgoing, feeding the ravenous beast which when released shall destroy your feeble foes. Seriously, by receiving or dealing damage, you charge the exotic perk. Beware though, switching weapons will remove half of your progress. When you activate a ravenous beast, you get a sub 0.4 second body shot kill time on an average player. Basically, no amount of damage resistance is saving your opponent from the sheer melt of the Tarrabah. You don't believe me? Well, remember that DPS chart. Here's Ravenous Beast. Yeah, no surviving that. If your opponent is foolish enough to let you charge the perk, they're gonna have to deal with the melt of almost 500 DPS, which will shred through them and their teammates. So why is it at number 2?
Because I don't have it.
And the drumroll, please, the number 1 entry to this list is the No Time to Explain Exotic Pulse Rifle. I don't think this needs much of an explanation. Getting 10 cumulative headshots summons a portal buddy. I know there's a lot of third partying going on in this video. Though the portal buddy is probably the best of the buddies we've seen until now. It blatantly aimbots your opponents, dealing massive damage often before your brain cells can even calculate where to shoot. This compounding damage on top of the high lethality of the 340 RPM high impact frame will shred through almost all damage resistance options. It's hard to quantify the exact DPS, but given that the portal buddy has much more range than something like Tarrabah, you could make the argument that it is in fact a better exotic perk. Your progress also doesn't go away when switching weapons, and those headshots don't have to be back to back to back, unlike with Hawkmoon's perk. If you want an easy build which will single-handedly stop almost all passive players, just put on the No Time to Explain with the Child of All Gods. Pro tip: against tethered players, body shots also count as precision hits, making it even easier to get that exotic perk. So we've come to the end of this list. Wait, I'm actually hearing from the studio right now that we have a zeros entry on this list because Ray started 0 what? Okay. The truthfully best weapon against passive players is the heavy, primary weapon called Fighting Lion. What the? Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.